I had this whole thing. I didn't know it would start this way, where we'd be all like talking to one another and greeting each other. So, but I did want to just kind of welcome us into this space and drop us in a little bit the way I find myself dropping in when I see your faces. Even in this moment, something happens to me. Um, I think most of you know me. I'm Jim Taylor. I'm a weaver and wisdom elder for Illumin. And I'm really delighted that you've joined us for this workshop on choosing presence that Jim and Heaney and I are cultivating here. And I came to my desk just a little while ago, and it's mid-afternoon here in San Antonio. I don't know where you're all at, but all this day I've been anticipating our time together, and I found myself walking into beauty, and waking up to it is the kind of thing that I say to myself when I notice it, that it's always there, but I'm waking up to it. And I saw it as the cold shafts of sunlight, gray, is coming in our windows here. It's 30 degrees in Texas. The whole place is shut down. Who knew that the only thing to destroy Texas is just send a little bit of cool air, and not much, just a little. But everything has been hunkered down. But when I look through the windows, right here at my office window, I have a box hedge, and right now there's this whole cadre of sparrows just hunkering down it like in sanctuary, and they're flittering in and out and somehow keeping warm and delighting me in the process. And it reminds me of a scripture where 2 or 3 gather in my name, so I will be there. And so it is. I feel that deep sense of presence connecting me here in this space. I feel grounded. There's definitely enough beauty. And I've waited patiently this whole day to greet you into this space. So I just really want to say a heartfelt good day, brothers. It's good to sit with you and to welcome all this beauty of the waking day that's offering itself so willingly to us. And even though we're here on Zoom, I just want you to know I'm happy for our friendship and the companionship that we share on this thing that we call the journey of illumination, and all the good memories of our connections along the way through this men's work. And it seems to me that we're collecting something of one another's souls. It's like a piece of our souls are just commingling and collecting as we share this journey together. And it yokes me to you in a way that I'm not completely in charge of. And it draws out in me you draw out in me. And it's like a mixture of generativity and these soul tending intentions that I have in my life mixing with yours. And there's a synergy there. And it draws me to the better parts of myself when I sit in counsel with men like you. So I have a real quiet eagerness to keep close to you, to kindle what sits in the space between us, and to be reminded in these moments of how precious you are to me. So with that, I greet you and welcome you. And I offer a prayer. It's a poetic prayer from Rumi for our time together, and just to begin it together. And he says, "Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 100 times. Come, come again. come. And so we will. Rudy, that guy knew a thing or two. As I introduced Jim Heaney, and as a way of dedication for our time together, may I invite our hearts to include the people of Ukraine. I'm sure they haven't left you in this day. And I know there are a lot of folks that feel very alone right now. So may something of our spirits commingle with them as they commingle with us in these moments. And we pray for peace, don't we? So with that, Jim Heaney, I want to welcome you, good brother. He put Timmer in it for a run for his money. Jim Heaney has a way of glowing as well. So those of us who know Timmer, you just look over at him, Jim. I can't point at him, but you know, just look at the one who's glowing there. I don't know. Some of these other guys are kind of glowing, maybe.
I think I'm blushing.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That's the internal bloom. But Jim Heaney, ever since I met Jim Heaney, and Bob Sabbath probably knew Jim Heaney before I did. Ever since I've known him, he has been talking about presence. I think I videotaped you, Jim. I was trying to remember this. In 2005, we were at Jemez Springs, and Richard or Stephen Pika had me videotape some guys for these breakout sessions, and I think you were one of them.
I actually, Stephen sent me the CD of that.
So you have?
I have it here somewhere at my house.
I'm sure I did just an outstanding job.
You actually did.
Stephen Pika was famous for just like recruiting people. I'm like, you want me to videotape videos? But anyway, you talked about presence way back then, and I remember as he was going through it, because I'm just videoing him. I forgot that I was videotaping. I was so caught up in what Jim was saying and having that kind of longing to stay present throughout the day. And Jim and I have been friends all these years. And I remember us taking a walk. We visited you in California, and you and I took a walk out by some park or maybe by the lake.
Yeah, the trail in the forest. Yes.
Was that 2012? I forget what year that was.
Was it that? It was that long ago, probably.
Or maybe.
Wow.
But Jim was going on again, because he never stops. So, and I said, Jim, you should write a book about this. And so I'm pretty sure I'm the reason you wrote the book, Jim, right? In front of all these guys. But nonetheless, he did write the book.
Yeah.
And as you may know already, developed an application, which I laughed every time I would say that out loud. You got an app for this? And he sure as hell did. He developed an app, and that thing just is like the second Holy Spirit in my life now. So she's always saying, hello, are you present? And so Jim Heaney is just a delightful man. He's been part of our Lumen work all these years. And before that, he walked with Richard Rohr for a number of years prior to that. And he's a generative man. He's one of few men that I could say wholeheartedly really not only believes what he's about to say to you, but he does it. So, Jim, I'm grateful to you for this work, for helping me with my own practice of presence, and I welcome you.
Thank you, brother, and thank you, brothers. It's a pleasure being with you. As Jim says, I do it all the time because, quite frankly, if the practice of presence didn't enhance, make my practical daily life better, why would I continue to do it the way I do? I wouldn't. And speaking of Jemez Springs, just before that, I had been practicing presence for about, I believe, around 23 years after my MROP in 1997. And right around that time at Hammond Springs, before that, Richard, he was in California, and me and my wife had lunch with him, and he was giving a talk at Loyola Marymount that night on presence. So me and my wife went to the talk, and I've been practicing presence already for 5, maybe 6 years, and absolutely beneficial. See, but what Richard was saying, okay, I wasn't actually experiencing that. I wasn't actually doing it the way he said it. So after the talk, I said, Richard, let me ask you a question. What exactly do you mean by presence? And he says, Jim, presence is everything. I went, everything? It was like a revelation to me. It was like, you mean I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years and absolutely beneficial, but I missed it. I missed the core of it. Okay. And I'm going to read you something from Richard, actually. He sent this out in February, but this really says what his sentiments are on being truly still and present. This is the last paragraph of what he said that in his meditation. He says, I want to say as strongly as I can that all of these elements and practices of religion, the Bible, sacraments, priesthood, churches, the rosary, contemplative sit, everything is to help us experience this essential and united self, pure and simple. That's all. If our religion doesn't help us experience this undefended and beloved self, then change it, get rid of it, or do something very different. And after that encounter with Richard in California, what I realized was what he was talking about was simply bringing in stillness to the point where we experience a vibrant inner life. And when he says to help us experience this essential united self, what he's talking about is a clear before and after. And until that time, I can't honestly say that was consciously happening to me. It was certainly beneficial what I was doing. It certainly was, it was beneficial, okay? But it wasn't a cure, okay? And a cure is exactly what Richard said. If we're not experiencing something, a union with spirit, and have a clear before and after, we're missing what God told us to do. Be still and know that I am God. And I've been practicing presence, teaching presence in jails for 23 years and communion services. And the one thing I know, when we practice presence as we should, it humbles us every single day, because we know we cannot change ourselves without experiencing God's spiritual energy. And as we get more into the workshop and now obviously it's essential. We have to read the book, we have to use the app, and more important is we have to actually apply the practice in our daily lives, because we're never going to think our way into presence. What we will think our way into, though, is anxiety and worry and stress and lack of self-esteem. And if someone asks me, well, why do you do this? I mean, so religiously every day. It's one simple reason. I refuse to create inner negativity. I refuse to allow my negative ego, my insecure ego, to take control of my inner life. I choose stillness. And stillness is a different relationship with the present moment. And it's a different relationship with the present moment because it is exactly what God told us to do. Be still and know that I am God. Without stillness, it is the pathway to spirit. And there truly isn't, as far as my whole life doing spiritual practices almost. There truly isn't another pathway to have an intimate relationship with God. So being with Jim, however present I was, I'm even more present after spending, especially very close over the last year and a half. I don't have to tell you about Jim, he's infectious. So I look forward to our journey together. Peace.
Thank you, Jim. I've known you so long, so I know the sincerity with which you speak. And I tease Jim. He's like Zig Ziglar, of business for Christianity, if y'all know who that is. It just seems really clear and simple to him. Just do it. And, and if it's not working, then his simple answer is, well, then you're not doing it right. And I just laugh all the time how simple and yet I know the depth of what he's saying. And it's been the high calling I have felt all of my life, and particularly as I've entered the ministry, in how to communicate that and the clear before and after. How do you really communicate that to someone? We think we're saying the same thing, and most of my church members think that it's a belief. Well, I believe that, and so they think if they believe it or they agree, make an assent. I check that box. That is what we're talking about, and what Jim and others who write about stillness and coming into presence, what I think of as waking up into the moment. And another way I describe that is falling into a posture where I meet God. Just an attempt at trying to find some kind of language to describe the ineffable that happens more to me when I do that than I'm in charge of, per se. But there is a conscious volitional participation on my part. And so I say to my buddies that we're getting online with this, and I say to them when they're going to do this with Jim, I say, you got to listen to Jim 2 or 3 times to really realize how, because he'll say it in one sentence, but if you just keep rolling that sentence over, you start to go, okay, actually, that's pretty profound. Pretty profound, that inner vibrancy that you've just put into 2 words there. I want that too, Jim. So thank you so much. Brothers, we want to, just before we launch off, we want to have this to be more of a discourse. And to do that, we need to kind of have you come forward just a little bit. And how many do we have now, Brian? Is it still 12 or did we lose somebody?
We're still at 12. We're
good. Good. We haven't lost anybody yet. When we start asking them for their social security numbers and their access to retirement accounts, we will lose a 1 or 2, I'm sure. But if you would just tell us your name, where you're at, and if you have been if you've been initiated with Illumin or Mankind Project or something else, just tell us that as a way of locating you a little bit. And maybe in a short sentence or 2, if you have a practice that you're actually engaged with currently, or a practice maybe that you've done that was meaningful, but like a season, it came and went, just some kind of awareness of where we're all at in our practice of presence. And I'm just going to pick to do this. Brian, I want to start with Brian because Brian is one of our colleagues, and he's been with us. Have we been doing this a year, Brian? How long have we been working together on?
Since at least March last year, yeah.
And so we sucked him in to be our help to put the website together and other things, and slowly but surely he may be passing us. I don't know, Jim, but he's a disciple and a teacher now. And so go ahead and introduce yourself, Brian.
Well, thank you, Jim. My name is Brian Mueller, and I'm near Dayton, Ohio, in a city called Centerville. And I was, that's where I'm zooming from. So I was initiated in 2014 at Pilgrim Park in Illinois. Our weaver was Belden Lane, and actually Jim Taylor was the initiator weaver. And one of my brothers at that initiation was Timmer, who's here. So Timmer and I were at that MROP. And just for comparison's sake, the next year I went to a Mankind Project, New Warrior Training. So I did that too in 2015 in Indiana. But I found the spirituality of Illumin to be a big draw. And I actually grew up in Cincinnati in the New Jerusalem community. So having some context for who Richard was very helpful for me as I kind of entered midlife. I do have a practice, but of meditation, and my spiritual work is very much informed by the 12 steps, because I started doing that first. And what I love about the 12 steps is it cured me of having to get everything right. And so with my meditation practice over the years, I kept thinking it had to be right, it had to be perfect. And at this point, I'm just grateful for the opportunity, the invitation to keep practicing and try to create space in my day to do the sit every morning. And I'm grateful for this app because I use the app as a reminder and as a tool for meditation. And part of my meditation, honestly too, is doing reading, but not, anything heavy, just, mystical poetry. I love Rumi, and writing. Writing is an important part of my meditation too. But it all starts with at least a 10-minute, 20-minute sit in the morning. So thank you, Jim. I'll pass. Oh.
Maybe I'll call on guys. Timmer, how about you, since he already wagged at you?
Yeah, I was just say, Timber Cashman, Woodway near Edmonds, near Seattle, Washington. And Pilgrim Park was a great memory and a great start. And I also did followed my son to Minnesota for his MROP in 17, and then did the 19 in Scalitude here in Washington, and then EROP 18 and 19. For me, TM was my first beginning back in the 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, I was involved in two kind of new age churches. With one had a psychic and the other one had a mystic. And more recently, I've started to attend William Gettner's morning meditations that he does out of Costa Rica. And I joined Brian with that. Chuck Fonzie is the one that gave it such an endorsement. And I've gone through a lot of family dynamics where I needed some compassion and forgiveness and grieving. So this is the bill. And I'm looking forward to more from this. Oh,
thank you. I'll just keep going around my screen. Bob Sabbath, here you are. You got to unmute. There he is.
Yeah. Well, they say I'm Bob Sabbath, but I'm not. I'm not Bob Sabbath. My friends know me as that. I'm in Mount Rainier, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And 2006, New York, MROP. That's 15 years ago. And a few years before that, I don't know, I was doing a silent retreat at a Franciscan monastery. And every day I would go to this guy's office, and we would talk. And he said, "Don't read any books for those 5 days, but his library was filled with all these books. And I pulled down a volume 2 of a 5-volume set, the psychological commentaries on the works of Gurdjieff and Uspensky. And it sounds like a great book, right? Like one that you'd really want to do. But the book exploded in me, and it exposed me to, I guess I would call it fourth way inner work. Gurdjieff was a guy who introduced the Enneagram, but for him, the Enneagram was not a psychological typing tool. It was the rules of inner transformation, kind of the intersection of what he called the law of 3 and the law of 7. And ironically, Jim, what you've stumbled onto has a whole different language system, but is very, very similar to some of the fourth way inner practices. You know, they would call it self-remembering. And they would also say that the first act of presence is seeing your sleep. And I always thought that was crazy. Like my first step in waking up is to see my sleep. And they also put this kind of inner vibrancy that you talk about. They talk about, you know, this very subtle inner body sensation, so that if we can get heart and mind and body all firing, that's actually a very practical definition of what being awake is, because most of the time we're only operating out of one center. You know, so our emotions take over our head, or our head takes over our emotions. And, you know, so it's something that I've worked with for the last 15 years. And I'm very interested in seeing how the work that you're doing kind of correlates with some of that as well.
Yeah. We have a ringer in case Jim and I, you know, flub up at all. We'll just bring in Bob. Rick, you're the man to follow all that good stuff.
All right. I'm Rick Bergman. I'm here in Manitoba, Canada. And I did my rights in Air Vipa. I think it was 2016. But my practice goes my waking hours. It's really how I do it. I know when I go to bed, say it again. Oh, no one's talking. Okay. I thought I heard somebody talking. My practice starts when I go to bed, because in the old days, I would tend to have the mind focus on things, and didn't matter where it focused, I could calculate it down to being fear. And so it was great to go to bed and fall asleep in centered mode, and to wake and then examine throughout the day. I think Lao Tzu may say it this way, that one peels potatoes, and so one could peel potatoes in the false self or the true. And so throughout the daytime, throughout the waking hours, it is I could feel falling off center, and I can feel it, and it doesn't go very good. There's always almost a guilt trip that arrives if I've fallen off. So the centering goes all day long, and I don't beat myself up for falling off, but I do fall off the horse. And so that's how the waking hours go. I peel potatoes all day long. Oh.
Very good.
Oh,
Hey, Charlie, my king.
Yes, good to be here, and thanks for the invitation. It was brought to me from Brian. I spoke with a friend who I went to college with many years ago, graduated in 1968, and I've sort of stayed in contact with this woman for a long period of time, but haven't met her in person probably in 50 years. And in our last communication, she said something that I have felt about myself that kind of describes why it is that I'm here. And what she said was, I have always been a seeker. And to be a seeker means that we've stayed open to new possibilities. We were together in a fundamentalist Bible college in Western Canada, and broke away from that along with Brian McLean and a few others that moved in a very different direction. And I came across Richard Rohr and Breathing Underwater, thanks to this woman who sent me the books. And when I told her about how wonderful they were, she said, "Well, I didn't read them. I just sent them to you." And it was like, this was like a divine intervention. And Beth and I have done 3 workshops on breathing underwater. And during the third one that we were doing, we said, well, we've got to get to do it. I would need to do something that involves Richard Rohr. And so another man from Columbus and myself, did I say I'm from Columbus, Ohio? Anyway, another man and myself journeyed out to solarize in 2017. In 2018, I did my MROP at Ghost Ranch, and you were the main weaver, Jim. It was an amazing experience. But I got to know Belden Lane very well at that. We shared some things and that particularly have to do now, most recently for him, with the suicide death of a child. And I had experienced that in 2012. My only child and daughter had committed suicide, and 32 years at that point in Alcoholics Anonymous kept me sober and alive. And my commitment to the 12 steps and to continuing growing spiritual life, I'm at 40 plus years of sobriety now. And it's just this whole wisdom base that keeps growing and growing because I'm a seeker. And that's the only way I can put it. I'm really, I was able to do a meditation teacher training class a couple of years ago. I have a regular practice. I sit oftentimes for an hour in the morning, and I love what presence brings to my day and to my life, and particularly to the men who I sponsor, and what I can pass on to them by hearing them. That's the best gift you can ever give anyone, is to actually hear them. And unfortunately, my wife reminds me of that every once in a while and says, "You're not listening." But anyway, we'll go from there. And thank you, Hope.
Thank you, Charles.
Oh,
Brian Sullivan.
You heard the name from Jim. I'm Brian. It's Vancouver, British Columbia. Same fine country that Rick's part of. And do we ever know how to protest? I did the EROP with Timmer, and Jim was part of the team, the first one in 2018, returned for 2019, and did the MROP out of order after the EROP. They sent me back a grade, and I got a chance to try again. I've enjoyed immensely the broadened fellowship with brothers that I've had in Illumin. The background in centering is not extensive for me. The background in meditation is a little more extensive. And as you heard from Timmer, I'm part of the crew that William has assembled and helps facilitate in the mornings, and I join it 3 or 4 times a week. It's been a very important time for me. I'm delighted to be here because one of my learnings that's coming up from Hallowing at the Moon, the howling time together with my cohort, that Timmer's also part of, is that the centering piece and the time in contemplative prayer, should I call it, is something that I want to have flower in my life. So I was quite attracted to this and to the current work we're doing in the North in the howling cohort. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you, Brian.
oh,
Hey, Scott Gunn. Come on, Nine.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Lanham, Maryland, just up the street from Bob Sabbath and around the corner from Oscar when he's in Maryland. Good to be with you, brothers, tonight. And what comes to mind for me is really beginner's mind. And I feel like it's one of the truer things in my contemplative journey. I feel like I don't have a very meditative mind. I have a mind that seeks lots of activity, and I felt a lot better. I listened to a Pema Chodron talk a number of years ago, and she calls herself not very meditative. And so I felt among friends. Drawing over the years on centering prayer, Thomas Keating and Basil Pennington really is kind of an origin story for me. And we're going on retreats at Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky, where I was scolded by a Trappist retreat master for talking. And Brother Luke, I still carry that scar in a warm way. "You worldly people," he said to me. But I'm thankful for a mentor who taught a course on Merton when I was in seminary years ago. And the course was called Flying High with Chop Suey Louie. And it was an introduction into the wonderful experience of mysticism. So that's sort of the origin for me. And I'm doing the Howling cohort with Rick and Jim and Oscar and Scott. And that's rich, because what's really coming more and more into play for me is the experience of silence and connecting with a more than human world. Oh,
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Hey, Scott Evans. Come on here, brother.
All right, brothers, it is great to be here with you this evening. And so my feet land in Delaware, the northern part of the state here. This is a state. It's not a capital of a state. I stumbled into meditation maybe 7 or 8 years ago, just by one of my wife's professors. She's in a counseling profession. One of her professors was having a 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction. So I was like, all right, sounds good. We'll give it a try. So I did that about 8 years ago. No spiritual connection. It was, again, meditation and quiet and focus on breathing. And we did some yoga and stuff like that. So kind of a wide range of experiences there. And then I stumbled on a Richard Rohr a couple years later, after I had been semi-meditative over those couple years after that class. And I did my rites in 2019 at Buffalo Gap. And ever since then, I've realized that class I took 8 years ago is weaving my rites of passage and the stillness and the silence and the quiet. It's all weaving together. And in some ways, it doesn't make any sense, but in some ways, I know that I miss it when I don't have it. And I almost don't have words to explain, but it's almost like being thirsty for water if I don't go for a couple days. So usually right now, my practice would be in the morning for 20 minutes centering prayer. That waxes and wanes, like you'd mentioned earlier, Jim. But I just say this, the thing that I've realized is a couple other guys had mentioned having an unmeditative mind or a busy mind. I would concur with that. And what I've realized as I'm learning to be quiet and still with myself. I never wanted to be quiet with myself because I think I didn't like myself. I'm learning to love who I am, and that's coming as a result of being with brothers like you. So I'm complete. Oh,
Thank you, brother. Scotty Johnson from Texas, who arrived naked. Unmute yourself.
Unmute myself. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm fully clothed. Let's see. I've been kind of a pilgrim, a seeker, and very fortunately, I found meditation and the practice of that years ago. Next week I'll be 73. I was my first experience with being present was in 1969 when I was in combat. There's two times that you are absolutely, completely, and totally present. One of them is combat, and the other is sex. And so after I got back and, went to UT on the GI Bill, I started searching for something, and I didn't know what I was searching for. I knew I was a pilgrim, but I didn't know what to do. I knew that I couldn't go around shooting up a post office, so I couldn't throw myself into combat to be present. And I knew that I couldn't go around raping women so that I would be present then. So I began to kind of search for it. And very fortunately, about 10 years ago, the VA discovered, I worked for the VA, and the VA discovered that if you will meditate for 30 minutes a day, your PTSD symptoms will be reduced by at least 30%, possibly even more. And so I was kind of thrown into that. At the same time, I was beginning a journey with Richard Rohr and others. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been throwing myself into this this process of being present. And so and Jim and I know each other fairly well. He's seen me naked. That's why he said something about being naked. But
That's pretty good.
I think he's seen me more than once naked. But anyway,
But
Jim well remembers the time we were on a JOI or MROP or something, and I showed everybody my third eye. But anyway, yeah, so I'm pushing myself, but also I'm waiting. I've said this about Jim before. One of the things that Jim kept saying at all the JOIs that he was in charge of, or MROPs that I helped staff, was he said to wait and just kind of open yourself up and allow it to come to you. Don't be thrashing around. So here I am. I'm not thrashing around. Here I am, not very smart, because as in typical fashion, I don't read all the directions. And so when I saw 5 o'clock, I had assumed it was Central Time, and it was Eastern Time. So that's why I'm 36 minutes late. So I'm sorry, but I am here. I am present, and I won't rape any of you.
thank you. Welcome, Scotty. Paul, I don't know if you want to join this crazy band of men, but come on.
I certainly do. I'm glad to be here. And And I'm here because of Timmer. He's getting a lot of accolades. I'm going to have to, don't tell him, okay? But when I walk with him in the forest, I'm going to have to knock him down a peg or two.
Good.
He moved into the neighborhood, I'm going to say 3, maybe 4 years ago. We've been here nearly 50 years. So he's the newbie on the block, but he's like many men have mentioned, he's a learner. He's learning the neighbors. He's learned the neighborhood. He found a man that can walk with him at deep levels in the forest that he'd never met before. And I appreciated Brian Mueller's having both initiations. That's a double vaccine program. And it helps motivate me, since I completed my NW, whatever it is, New Warrior Training, October of 2018. And this was because my therapist said, this is what you need to do. And he had been initiated 15, 20 years earlier and so forth. Yeah, there were some guys that saw me naked there. So that's part of that initiation anyhow. So I come with a different background, and it's been interesting to start to, since you're a weaver, Jim, to weave those two together. And it really reminds me, I grew up, I began my religious education in a Lutheran church with confirmation. We didn't go to church before that. And of course, back in the 60s, we knew that we couldn't associate with Catholics. And then, long story short, I hear Father Keating speak here in Seattle in about 1993. I've already had an experience with a Jesuit at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin in 1965. Where I'm a little 20-year-old and wonder why he's got a red passport and I've got a purple one. So that's the beginning of my meditation practice. Now I'm just trying to think what that's even called, but I've heard it. You all know, most of you know Father Keating, centering prayer.
Center prayer.
So centering, so prayer, yeah. And I've modified that because I do listen to Pema Chodron and the East, and I've modified it so it fits my need. And I've joined William, like Timmer has introduced me. It's tough living next to Timmer. He's Mr. Magnet, and but he doesn't, yeah. Well, since you all know about Father Rohr, you probably know Cynthia Bourgeau. And I've been on a number, I was in Contemplative Outreach Northwest here back 20 years ago. Been on a number of silent weeks with her. I participated in the Solarize in 2020. That was an unbelievable change. The biggest impact was we have forest, Timmer and I, within 3 minutes of our front doors. And to go into that forest with the intention, wandering, was a whole new world for me about being present. And that's not part of the MKP program. Let me see. But you both have something, you have a lot of things in common. Got to say that. Authenticity is the number one thing. Authenticity. Whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm experiencing, it's okay. It's not only okay, it's welcome. For me, it's huge to hear your anger is welcome here, Paul. Your fear is welcome here. Oh. And one other difference, and I've appreciated it, is the MKP initiation involves coming up with a mission statement. And my mission statement has been, I co-create a world of reconciliation by my presence, my connections, and my compassion. And so I've been including presence. I know how important that is. And it's great to be here with you, men. And I realize, yeah, I feel at home. With that, I'm in.
Thank you, Paul. Hope. And it looks like our buddy from El Paso, Texas, Oscar, is going to bring up.
Yes, hi, brothers. Thank you, Jim. Yes, so my name is Oscar Carrillo, and I'm in El Paso, but was in Maryland for about 25 years and just moved back in El Paso. And so I did my MROP in 2016 in West Virginia with Bob Sabbath, and Jim was the weaver, one of the weavers. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
And yeah, so my practice, or I've always, I was a Jesuit associate, so I was considered Jesuit order. I kind of developed a lot of my spirituality and the idea of discernment and the examen. So this idea of presence really piqued my interest in terms of discernment. I feel it's kind of like the examen, so I want to learn more about it, and feel it's very important. I want to be present, and I really like who was the person that spoke first? I'm sorry. Jim H was saying in terms of having anxiety and how to work on being clear and present, in our lives. So that's why I'm here, brothers. Thank you.
All right. Oh, wow, Jim, I don't know if we can really work with this motley crew. What do you think?
Great group of men.
It
for
is.
sure.
We hit the jackpot.
Yep, I agree.
Well, it's humbling because it's clear that you guys didn't, arrive on the proverbial cattle trailer. You've been doing some work, and that's beautiful, because I think the conversation is more informed, when that's been happening. And I appreciate Jim's story where you were practicing presence, and yet for 5 or 6 years, you said, and yet you had this revelation that you were not really not where you needed to be or wanted to be or longed to be. Maybe, I don't know what adjective you put in there, but
it was practicing presence and having relief versus practicing presence and allowing God's Spirit to make it a cure.
He always says stuff like that. I have to unpack. I spent an hour and a half with him on the phone over statements like that. For me, Jim, when I try to say what's been happening to me in those moments, I always come up with these words like surrender and yield to, give myself over to, falling into. It feels like it's a volitional choice, but it's actually a letting go that is followed right in the midst of that. And then this encounter, I would call it. It's an encounter.
Yes. That's everything.
Yeah. And when I say what you're talking about in terms of stillness, then I'm actually saying coming, similar to Bob Sabbath, what he was describing about, becoming awake to it. And in that moment, I realized I've been asleep. Bob, I think that was a delicious way to describe that. It's in those moments I'm clear. Wow, I fell asleep. And I don't know if you've ever been driving and had that happen, and you kind of have this. I always wonder, how long was I asleep? But this practice is a way, for me to keep myself alert to that intention to wake up, to be present. Like, I forget Scotty, you're always so trickster, so much trickster energy, combat or sex, I'm not sure about that. I do know what it means when I wake up in that moment. And so, Jim, I'm grateful, for you to take us into a little bit more what you mean by this whole practice. And do you want to begin by talking about it, or do you want to do it together and then talk about it, or which would you prefer?
Maybe I'll do a little
Of both.
foundational stuff, and then we'll talk about it afterward, after the practice. And hopefully, the brothers have some questions for us.
Fantastic.
I think one thing that's important is the practice of presence doesn't replace any practice we do, but it absolutely enhances every practice we do. And it interfaces with every practice we do. Now, like all of you, I've read many. That's why when I wrote the book, I said to the editor, I've read at least 10 to 15 Thomas Merton books. Well, after the book was published, I actually counted them. I had 22 Thomas Merton books. Okay. I had probably the same amount of Richard Rohr books. And naturally, I have Keating, I have St. Augustine. It's on and on, like all of us. But I have to be very honest with you. 3 things have changed my life. I read scripture every day, like all of you, I'm sure. 3 things. Number 1, Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Boom. Number 2, Jesus tells us, I leave you peace, my peace I give you. It's a peace you will not find in this world. And number 3, when he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he tells us, love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then he says, all the laws and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments. Okay, now I say that is the book for one reason. When I actually did it, number 1, being still. That's the only pathway to an intimate relationship with God. I know that. Only why? I didn't know it the first 5 or 6 years because I didn't think it was possible. Then I leave you peace. My peace I give you. So when I talk about a vibrant and alive, again, yeah, I had intermittent experiences of my vibrant and alive, my spirit, God's spirit within. Absolutely. Not once I made it primary in my life. And the third, I don't get confused with scripture anymore, but I know this. If I don't love God and love my brothers, it's impossible for me to become consciously present. We can't hide from ourselves. Someone said earlier about being alone with ourselves. See, when we're alone with ourselves, like it or not, we have to face the full self. It's that simple. And the full self has to embarrass us, humiliate us. It has to have initially a sense of guilt and even shame. But guilt and shame have to disappear because we also know we're forgiven. So it's those 3 scripture readings after years of practice that became alive within me. Because when we're alone with ourselves, that's when we create all our inner fears and conflicts. That's just the way it is. And stillness is a different relationship with the present moment because we're putting our trust in God, meaning this, as we become still and we refuse to allow our insecure and fear-filled ego to explode with negative thoughts in an inner dialogue within us, and we choose the present moment, we're putting all our trust in God's Spirit. But to have that confidence requires three very important things. Requires stillness. There has to be access through stillness. And third, there has to be inner spiritual conditioning. That's why we made the app, for that reason. It can't just be a morning practice. I meditated years, as I said, using it, absolutely beneficial. But it was relief. It wasn't a cure. Because one thing becomes, as we do this cohort, what becomes very, very obvious, and we read the chapter, okay, and we answer the questions, and we do the practices, becomes very, very clear to us, you know why we can do it? Because we're not doing it. It's being done to us when we bring in stillness. So we've surrendered to the peace and power of the present moment. But I can't say this enough. The practice, the experience of the practice is what teaches us. All the knowledge, spiritual, religious, whatever knowledge, theological knowledge we have in our mind is just not going to get us there. We can't think our way into presence. And then we'll hopefully we'll have some questions later, maybe after the practice. I might say one thing about the app though. See, let's say, which people have told me, and I talk about it every day. I mean, hundreds of people. And some people have said, I just kind of shut the app off. Well, and I tell them a very simple fact that I learned myself. Resistance will always be within us, and it could be extremely strong until we have an alternative, until we have a contrast. And as we grow in presence, it's unmistakable, the contrast. We'll never choose being unconscious when we actually inner condition ourselves spiritually to realize we have a choice. We have a choice to allow spirit to do to us what we cannot do ourselves. And we'll talk more later. And hopefully, please, I hope you have questions for me and Jim. It's very important.
Listening to you, Jim, I'm just thinking about how you framed all that. Irenaeus in the 2nd century said, surely the glory of God is found when a human being is fully alive.
Vibrant and alive.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking as you said that to be fully alive, and which is what you were saying, you cannot be fully alive without those ingredients. You name them as 1, 2, 3, but they're this awareness that life does not start and end in this place, especially in this place where most of us inhabit. We're so out of touch with our own body, much less other bodies. And you can't be alive if love is not permeating not only the loving and welcoming of yourself into being, but the welcoming and being of your neighbor. And we know that includes everything else as well. I remember hearing John O'Donohue say one time something like this. He could say anything. Call me to breakfast in that, Irish lilt that he has, and I'm coming. But he said something like, if you walk out into the day and all you see is dead space to get you from where you are to where you're going, you will miss everything.
Yeah.
But if you walk out into your day seeing everything as alive, and he said, because it is, you will have a conversation with everything. And I remember I was taking notes rapidly, and I looked at that. I was so delighted. And then I wrote out the side, and what else is everything but God? And I think that's the essence of waking up.
Yeah.
And then it moves us into a way of relating to everything, which is why I love you so much. Because if you're hearing it, brother, Jim is all about the practice, the practical. Yeah. Okay, I heard you say that. Now let's do it. And he's trying to figure out, well, how do you put this? How do you actually do these things? That we talk about all the time. And I really believe that the practice of coming away, it reminds me of matins or, monastic life where they're praying the hours, in a communal way, and they're trying to wake up. It reminds me of some of that tradition. And I don't know if any of that informed you, Jim, when you were thinking about the app, but as others have indicated, I know there's an overlapping from all these wisdom traditions and spiritual intentions that held this same idea that we could come alive to everything. It is possible to come alive, but it's not going to happen without a very serious relationship with that intention, at least not for me. I don't know about the rest of you guys,
No,
but
for no one. For no
I'm a
one.
professional resistor is what I'm. So Jim, do you want to talk to us some more, and then invite some questions?
Sure.
What is it? Or do you, well, let me just let you see what you want to say.
Yeah.
I have questions.
I think with the app, let's say, there's, for everyone, initially, there's resistance. Okay. But I can tell you this here from my own experience is that every time we resist doing presence, number one, that's when we should do it automatically for one simple reason. When we feel resistance and we actually take those 3 conscious breaths, I'm not talking about biological breaths, taking 3 conscious breaths with always the same intention to connect with God's spiritual energy. There's almost an immediate stoppage of that inner negativity. Okay. And the other thing is, resistance is always one thing. It's our ego trying to escape the present moment because it cannot control us in the present moment with its fears and its inner conflicts and its lack of self-esteem and its doubt. It's only as we inner condition ourselves spiritually through doing it consistently. And the other thing it's worth mentioning is, see, we may say to ourselves, well, this is, when I do this, I think I might I feel like I'm missing something. Well, the only thing we're missing is all the anxiety, worry, fear, and lack of self-esteem we're going to create in an unconscious mind. And if we think we don't have time to do it, okay, what we're really saying to ourselves is, I don't have time to stop all the inner negativity I'm going to create. But as we do it, it happens quickly if we do it consistently. If we don't do it consistently, obviously we're going to doubt it. So it's the practice that teaches us. And that is the pathway, spirit, stillness.
That's the inner confidence that you talk about. It's built through the practice and then having what you say, the clear before and after.
Yeah. One of the obstacles in doing the book and doing the app was, because now I'm doing it a long time, okay? Now it's going 20 years. I'm already practicing presence. And the first 5, were relief, not a cure. And my obstacle was, how am I going to explain something I didn't think was possible until I did it? You don't do it in words, and the book ain't going to change anyone, and the app ain't going to change anyone, and anything I say ain't going to change it. It's only the stillness, only the surrender. That's what's going to change each of us.
Gotta have the experience.
Yes. And the motivating factor always is what we experience inside as we become still. And it humbles us, which is our real strength, because we know we have to surrender to the peace and power of the present moment if we want to be free inside.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Jim, you wanna let these guys just hop in and see what they want to say?
Yes, absolutely.
So guys, just go ahead and unmute yourselves so you can comment along the way. You know, I don't want to strangle you guys. Just try to be lean, and any comments or questions that you have for Jim, or yeah.
You know, Bill Plotkin says the eighth stage of life is surrender. And man, we have so much resistance to that because our culture, our Western culture, what do you mean surrender? Our American culture, I remember when I went to Vietnam, they were all saying, we've never lost a war. And then we got our ass handed to us. And so I think that surrender is, we have to understand there's resistance because we've been programmed to resist this. Our culture and our country and our parents, God love them, they were trying to do the best they could, but they set us up for failure.
Yeah, Scotty, I'm thinking of the ego. Jim mentioned it earlier. It's so terrified, really, of that, and it's why it's critical. You can't kill the ego, so anybody that thinks you can just get rid of it is for a lose-lose situation. But you can build a friendship, with that egoic strategic mind, and create, I think, the possibility. It took me a lot of work, Jim, to find a friendship with stillness. I really was kind of terrified about what am I supposed to do in there. And my background, evangelical, well, I was supposed to talk. that was prayer. I told God his to-do list, and I wanted to be real clear about it so he wouldn't get it wrong, And we thought that was really what prayer was. God, would you help those poor people over there? We were always thought that was something. But when I started to build a friendship with silence and the stilling of the strategic mind, and not doing it perfectly, as someone said, I can't remember who, Brian or Rick, you said, yeah, just realizing, okay, it's not about doing it perfectly. It's about the intention to come to that place and keep cultivating, Jim, I think, that friendship so that we build that inner confidence.
Oh, yeah.
Through the practice.
I think the biggest, which actually you made me very aware of in the first cohort we did, was we have to explain it. None of us is going to do it perfectly. It ain't about doing it perfectly. It's about building that doing it consistently enough to build that inner foundation. And once our inner confidence changes, and again, our motivating factor is connecting with that vibrant inner life that's always available when we are consciously still. And if I go over the last, especially the last 15, 18 years, and I say, every time that I felt unease or doubt or just a lack of self-esteem, it always was because I simply wasn't bringing in stillness. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but God becomes the teacher as we allow him to humble us every day.
And what's been helpful to me, I was doing this, I think all of us in Lumen, we have this practice of the sit, we call it, which is essentially what we did with the app just then. And then I would have this, I felt like I was fairly present throughout the day. I'm blushing now. So Timmer, it's my turn. I felt like I was, pretty present. But what this app did, and Bob, help me out here, because I did not like this app too much. It was just like incessant. It would not stop. And it would give me no break. It was just there. Like I've already missed 2, and I would be bothered by that. But what it let me know is, that when I am present a lot, I move into present conscious contact with God and the surrendering in that moment and the stilling of moment. But I would choose those times is what I figured out. God was at my mercy.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing great because most of these other guys, not this group, but most of these other guys weren't doing it nearly as much as me. So pretty good. But the app, this sort of ringing, and I think of the blackbird calling, if you guys know David White's poem about that, the blackbird calling, and it's creation announcing itself. Do I stop and wake up, or the church bell that calls us to prayer, and I feel like that's what this app is doing. It's a way of building a friendship. And once I get past the rules and I'm messing up and everything, it's a door, it's a knock at my door. And my friend is on the other side of that door. And, if any of you guys knocked on my door, I'd be delighted and I would rush over, and I really wouldn't care what you were interrupting. And so that's the friendship that I feel like I'm building with that interruption. And it's starting to lead to the intersection, like you said, of all those other practices. And, and I'm hearing that knock a lot now, not just with the chime. So I know some of you have already been doing it. Brian, you've been doing it for a long time too now.
I have, and it's been extremely beneficial to me. The thing that came to mind as we were talking here today and I was listening was that when the student's ready, the teacher, or the corollary for me would be the tools, start to emerge. And, I have had a meditation practice. This deepened it, enriched it for me. And certainly during the pandemic and during some other things that were happening in my personal life at that time, it really has made a huge impact on me. In fact, the question I want to ask both of you right now, both Jim Heaney and Jim Taylor, is, we're hosting a workshop built around this practice of presence coming up in March and April, 8 successive Saturdays. And so we've been registering men. And then last week I got this email from a man who says, I am considering the practicing presence workshop. Is this workshop a reflection of Christianity? I am definitely not, and he capitalized, not a Christian. And I'll preface this just right away with saying that I responded to him. He did end up registering, but I would really want to hear what you would have said to him or what you might say in reference to that.
Well, I would say that, number one, it's based on the Gospels. That's just a fact. But the Gospels are based on one thing, real life now. So if anyone who comes, they may not be want to be a Christian, let's say, but I would assume they have to believe in a power greater than themselves. That it would be a prerequisite. They might call it the Great Spirit, or whatever name they might have, but they would have to. I don't know what benefit could they get out of something if they said, "Nah, I believe in any of that stuff." I don't know I don't know. God could certainly change them, but they have to ask God to change them in order for God to change them, or a greater power. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. You can't divorce yourself from your tradition, and if you do, just to do John O'Donohue again, you don't know where you're located. But I do really sincerely think whatever tradition you've embraced, if you really stay on a dedicated spiritual journey, you're going to outgrow it. I just don't know how the religions of the world are. They're a part of the asleep. They're asleep too, and part of the sedation is the word I was looking for. Because you can get involved in a religion fairly easily. Some people think it's hard, but it's like you say, Jim. You go through there and you realize I've been doing this, and it helps. It's not evil. Well, hopefully, there are evil structures, but anyway, at some point you start to realize there's another door to walk through.
Yeah.
And I remember just in my tradition, Jesus had been with his disciples for 3 years. It's towards the end. He's praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's this really rough time. Things are all coming to a head. Nobody knows what's about to happen, even Jesus apparently. And he comes back. He's going off by himself to have, this conversation. And he comes back and his guys are all asleep. He's like, "Can't you just stay awake for an hour?" He said, And I think it's a real metaphor, really. So if someone's worried to me about a religion, I always say, look, this is about you and whatever practice brings you alive. What do you do that brings you alive? That a human fully alive, to use that Irenaeus passage again.
Yeah.
The glory, if you want to, what is the glory of God? Because that's strange language. What are we really saying? And Irenaeus said it's seen in a human fully alive and awake. And that's the perennial tradition too, Brian. And so Richard has taught all of us that all religions form out of the perennial wisdom. And so in my opinion, it doesn't really matter which religion, you find your way into the perennial tradition. But if you don't find your way into and out of the perennial tradition, your religion's probably too small. So,
what was it? Thomas Merton that said, if the person you were 10 years ago were to meet the person you are today and would not think that you're a heretic, then, you're not growing in your faith. You're not maturing in any place or fashion. I know I get that question all the time. Like I said, I teach at the VA, I teach mindfulness, and somebody's always saying, "I'm a Christian. This mindfulness is Buddhism." And I said, "No, it's not." But I said, I tell them the same thing. I said, I had the privilege of sitting at the feet of Thich Nhat Hanh for a week in a monastery, and one of the things he started with saying was, if this practice doesn't make you a better whatever you are you a Catholic? This practice doesn't make you a better Catholic. It doesn't make you a better Buddhist, doesn't make you a better Protestant, doesn't make you a better neo-Synephrine or whatever. But the purpose of it is to make you, I don't want to, the word better is not really good. It's just maybe fulfilled is a word.
It interrelates with whatever practice. It's not going to steal your tradition, is what you're saying. It's going to mature it. Yeah, because you notice there's no Catholic way of breathing, right? There's no Baptist way. There's no gay way of breathing, a straight way.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah, it's breath, and it's the animating breath that brought us into being. And I don't really personally care what name tag you put above that. But there's some awareness, like Jim said, that is necessary, that animating breath didn't originate in you. It is you now, but it originated at some place, somewhere beyond you. And it originates in everything else too, which brings us into that unity. And I experienced that, Brian, to your question, when I'm breathing, I don't even think of any kind of religious, really, tenet when I'm doing those things. It feels like, also like Scott Evans, or I forget who said it, maybe Scott Gunn talked about a beginner's mind. That's part of the unraveling. David White, in his poetry, he describes what William Blake says, that we have to come into a relationship with the first order of things. And that's the place you were when you came into the world as a little kid, and things weren't predefined for you, and you could just experience everything with wonder and with amazement. And they're down on all their four hands and knees, and they're looking at a blade of grass or a butterfly or a caterpillar with this amazement, because they don't have any presupposition about what that is, and they're just free to experience it. And part of, I don't know if that's what Fourth Way does, Bob Sabbath. I'd love for you to talk for a moment, but where you move into that place of a willingness to be completely vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, one of my questions, I love this term, the inner conditioning, because waking up and staying awake are two different things.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So all that I need to have for waking up is an alarm clock, and I can use an app for that. I can, in a lot of the Fourth Way tradition, the way it's organized is that the group creates an alarm clock for the week. It's kind of like an inner life experiment. For instance, every time you go through a door, come back to yourself, come back to God. So it's kind of like seeing how we go on autopilot, and we're not inhabiting what we are doing, or, so the group creates an alarm clock, and most of the time the alarm clocks are forgotten. So if that group comes back, and a lot of people report, I went through 1,000 doors and never once came back to myself. And that's important to see. I mean, I think it's important to see our resistance, because that creates a dependence. Like, this is something I can't do on my own. And poverty is the gateway to all the new growth in us. And if we don't see our inner poverty and we think we can do it, we're not going to get there. So, and a morning sit's not going to do it. We have to have a way of bringing this into life as we go through the day. And in the Fourth Way tradition, it's called self-remembering. And when we go away from ourselves and we come back, it's kind of like breathing. I'm giving myself to life, but life doesn't take me. And so I breathe back, knowing knowing that I need help. You know, if I don't have help, I'm lost. I am totally lost. You know, so I come back to myself. I see my poverty. There's a longing, there's a surrender, there's a knowing that, you know, something higher is needed, or I fall. I just fall. And so in the fourth way, it creates a substance that a very fine energy in the body can accumulate, because to stay awake, we need fuel. And this kind of and if we don't create this fuel in us, our capacity to stay awake is diminished. It might be a longing, but we don't have within us. That's why this term inner conditioning interests me, because I think that if we do this practice, it can start to create the fuel that's needed to stay awake in a more stable fashion, so that we just don't go on autopilot so much.
Very good. And if I could answer that, first of all, what you're saying is 100% correct.
Mm-hmm.
I think the gift is of inner conditioning spiritually is, number one, we're not doing it.
Right.
The intention is what's doing it. And
exactly.
the stillness.
Mm-hmm.
So what the first thing it does to us is humble us. It has to.
Mm-hmm.
We know we can't do it. Spirit does what we cannot do ourselves. So growing in it becomes, I don't want to say very easy, but as you practice, it actually does become very easy, because you know, all of a sudden, it's your body and my body telling me, what are you doing here? This is not reality. Why are you creating this fear? Fear is always in the future. It's not now. Why are we doing it? So yes, different words, but the same goal, let's say. But the wonderful thing about practicing presence with the right intention is that we absolutely know it's not what we do, but what's being done to us.
Right.
You don't really have to accomplish anything. It's the
You got it. Yeah.
Which is so difficult. I mean, that's it right there.
You don't have to accomplish anything is the whole gift. It's like we constantly look for an answer. And then as you become still, you realize, actually, I don't need an answer. That is the answer.
Jump in, buddy.
I have a question on the app in terms of the 3 questions. So when you do the 3 breathings, do you ask the question?
No, you do that. Well, it was meant to do it separately. The breaths of the breaths, you, as we say in the 3 breaths, I'm connecting with God's spiritual energy. You just say that at least once. Now, the 3 questions, it sort of keeps us spiritually accountable. And they're simple questions, but I've been asking myself them for at least 12 years. And I can honestly say, every time I ask myself, they make me spiritually accountable. But I'll tell you another thing that's so important. See, if we take what do we want to accomplish as we become still and have this intimate relationship with God? We want to actually be able to answer 3 questions, not the same one that's in the app, but 3 other questions, and they are this. When I am present, do I know why? Okay. When I am not present, do I know why? And if I'm not present, do I know how to get back to presence? When we can answer those 3 simple questions through our own experience, we absolutely are a different person than when we began the practice. Because now we know that we can connect with the power that could change us from the inside. And again, it's not what we're doing, it's what's being done to us.
Thank you.
Are the questions different in the app? Am I present now? Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, well, the app is the spiritual accountability. First question we're going to ask ourselves is, am I present now? How do I feel inside? And do I have a sense of calm or peace at some level? Now those it's almost like we're talking to ourselves inside when we ask them. Okay. Now the other questions are, as we, be quite honest with you, I'll say a lot. I always wake up in the middle of the night. I sleep for 5 hours, I can go to work. But if I do it by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm dead tired. So I'll do my questions, I'll do my meditation. And it's like it became my special time alone with God. Now, the app, when I made the app, naturally you're wondering, is this going to work? And I tell everyone this is about my wife. Now, my wife has been basically practicing presence with me on and off for 20 years. But she'd do it for a week, and stop for a week, do it for 3 days, stop for 4 days. Since the app, which is about a year and a half, she hasn't missed one day doing the practice of presence with me when we use the app. So I said, if my wife can do that, anyone can do it.
I have a question. Both Thomas Merton and Thomas Keaton have been referenced. My introduction to this whole concept is that little book of Brother Lawrence's, Practicing the Presence of God. Can you connect that dot to this?
Oh, do you have the book?
I have 2 of them, yeah.
No, the book, Choosing Presence.
Not yet, no.
Oh, there's a section on, that's exactly Brother Lawrence. There's a section on Brother Lawrence in the book. It's not only connect, there is no presence without Brother Lawrence. The practice of how's like only said it 1,000 times. Practicing the presence of God. That's Brother Lawrence. And it's funny you should ask that. When the book was over, basically, the editor said to me, you have to actually say something more about Brother Lawrence. Now, I had read the book years before I wrote this book. Now, when I read it, I realized I said everything he said in that book, just use different words. Mm-hmm. So being present has nothing to do with the individual. There's something in common with each of us that actually becomes still. All the things Brother Lawrence said, it was uncanny. And when you read the Choosing Presence, you'll see that everything I said 10 years after I read his book was basically what he had in his book that I never really got until I became more present.
Yeah, Jim and I have had these kind of conversations, Timmer, where we're quoting different writers back and forth to each other. And Thomas Keating has been the most influential with me. Some of you mentioned him.
Yeah.
And then through Thomas and Richard, I found Merton. And, Merton isn't like just a novice read. You got to work at him a little bit. And Cynthia Bourgeau equally. So I started finding Jim Finley, some of these other guys too. And all the while, Jim Heaney was satelliting over here, always choosing presence with his Zig Ziglar smile and everything. And the thing that I have just found so delicious, Jim, if guys can hear it like I hear, I'm always laughing on the phone with him. He just will cut right to the chase and say these things like, well, if you do it, it works. And it's his answer to my 3 paragraphs of talking about, how difficult it is, your strategic mind gets in the way and pulls you out of presence. And he just, well, if you do it, with the right intention, he'll add these little, zip, he'll zip, zinger on it if with the right intention. Oh, well, there you go. Intention, yeah. Rick Bergman, what are you doing over there? I know you're a contemplative man.
Just three little questions for Jim Heaney. Jim, is your book written for individual, like personal use, or could it be used in a small group setting?
Oh, absolutely. Either way, sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Second kind of question is you were mentioning the words personal resistance will always be there until we
have a contrast. In other words, when we become still and we actually experience our environment in a life, now when resistance comes, as we when I say inner condition ourselves, we have to do it more than once a week or something. You got, it's every hour. But let me say something about that too. As we practice presence and grow in presence, what you're going to find yourself doing, what's happening to Jim now, Jim Taylor. See, the thing goes off, but he's already breathing. I tell people, which is the truth, by the time 10 o'clock in the morning comes around, I probably breathed 50 times, but not because I felt inner unease. It's because I felt a calm and a peace I wanted to stay in. That's why I breathed it 50 times. So it's the inner conditioning spiritually is quite everything, really.
Right on, perfect. Last question then. Bob Sabbath mentioning the inner poverty, and I've got a theoretical question about centering. Can a person, or do you believe a person can become centered without knowing themselves or without loving themselves?
Well, you become centered to find out who you are, and God's going to tell you who you are. I think a big obstacle for me was when I had to admit and accept that I wasn't holy and I wasn't worthy. And it didn't matter. That's a big thing for me. Then I think after that, surrendering to that fact, okay, meant a tremendous lift to my intimate relationship with God, as it would all of us.
I'm going to add a fourth question. Many of us have gone through lots of pathways before we get to the part where we say we want to stay centered.
Right.
And we've done a lot of life. And can we take, let's say, younger people who have done less life and have this whole thing? Do you feel this thing could work? The process would work for somebody who's, well, I don't know how to say this, very, very green.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But we first have to become centered and condition ourselves spiritually, condition ourselves spiritually, because it has to be attraction. It does no good to know everything written about presence or mindfulness or stillness and not being still and mindful and present.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a one answer to that, Rick, but it does seem like there is a period of time that's necessary for practicing the rule of faith, whatever that is, before you get to this surrender. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I've witnessed it so many times where people are, they have to have some, you said it earlier, Jim, a contrast,
an alternative to,
the longing for, and I don't know.
It's like we start off practicing presence, but as we grow in presence, we long to be present. So the effort of the practice becomes pretty effortless. We know God's always going to be there. And we know if we're in control, we're never going to be there.
I can see we're bumping up across our time. So if you have to go, please feel free. And if you have a little bit of time, we'll just let this kind of naturally close off, but we are close here to a finish point. Is there a burning kind of question or comment that someone would like to make?
I was surprised that you had us breathe through the nose and breathe out. Like when I go to the gym, he wants me to breathe in one way and breathe out the other way. So could you get in and out of that one?
Well, I don't have the exact, I have some literature on that, but to take a deep, slow breath in through the nose and a long, slow breath out, and the out breath should be longer than the in breath. Actually, if you take a breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, that also can cause hyperventilation. I don't know if you know that. I mean, the gym, it might be, I don't know how you guys, what exactly, I'm sure you don't mean quick breathing in and out through your mouth and nose that can hyperventilate you. But it's, it's like, we talk about, okay, how the practice should be done, only for one reason, but when the bottom line really is, after you do this for a month, 2 months, 3 months, because it's actually happening to you. And by the way, you start practicing and it may happen to you the first time you do it too. It's all different in any person, but the intention is everything.
So I think what I'm hearing, Timmer, he's not really focused on the in and out, how you do it necessarily. Mechanics, is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct. Mechanics don't bring in stillness. Intention brings in stillness.
There in a lot of focus on breath these days, so you're probably responding to that. And there probably is some other ideas out there on the mechanics, but I'm just focused on breathing right now, and maybe I'll graduate.
Yeah, and I might say this too. What's very, very important is, as we say in the app, is that as we're breathing, we have to praise God and ask Him what do we want Him to do for each of us inside.
I really like the whole idea of the intention, Jim. It's saved me so many times. My favorite little story about Thomas Keating is a woman was on a silent retreat with him, and she made the comment that I'm terrible at this centering prayer thing. And Thomas Keating said, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, because I must have fallen out of centering 1,000 times this morning while we were doing all that. He goes, oh, that is so terrific. And she said, what's terrific about that? And she said, what? He said, well, that was 1,000 times you came back to God. So it's not the
That's
falling
perfect.
out of it or the falling asleep to it. Apparently that's endemic.
Yes.
It's coming awake that's important. That's the important thing.
Intention, yes.
Coming back to center.
Jim, one question about the breaths. When you go to the breaths, are you sometimes doing that simultaneous with another activity?
I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm in my office and I have a meeting with our managers and they're talking. I'll always be breathing during the meeting. Now, I'm breathing consciously, but I can also hear what they're saying. But what makes us always come back to it is that, again, that inner vibrant life that we get a taste of. And sometimes we get a little taste of it, or it's instead of vibrant inner life, it might be just a little calmer, or it also can be extremely deep and humbling. So it's, again, not what we do, but what's being done to us when we consciously breathe with intention. And don't worry about doing it right or wrong. God will take care of that.
That's why we call it a practice, because it's really not so we'll wake up every hour. It's so we'll wake up and wake up all the time. You know, we start to live in that vibrancy that you're talking about, Jim. It just arrives, you know, all day long. And it's at various levels. But once you know what it is, I think that's the key. Then you recognize it, like you say, some part of it is having its way with you all the time. That's how I feel. It's always,
Yeah.
It's always there.
Yeah.
I wanted to read a quote from Merton and then just kind of close this. He says, from the texts, we see that in meditation, we should not look for a method or a system, but cultivate an attitude. And I think that's what you mean by intention. Cultivate an attitude, an outlook, faith, openness, attention, reverence, expectation, supplication, trust, joy. All these finally permeate our being with love, insofar as our living faith tells us we are in the presence of God. And that in seeing, we don't see. He starts to go into this language, but you see him wrestling with the same kind of thing. How do you talk about this ineffable quality of being present to creation itself, to all things, to God, whatever you're going to name this, the wonderment that we exist in? And if you try to, the minute you write it down, you've already kind of lost it in a way, because it's bigger than that, what you just wrote. It's bigger than whatever practice we can come up with. You know, it's life itself. I think you've said that. Richard said it's everything. It's life itself we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And we're in a good enterprise if we're wrestling with these questions, and if we're surrendering ourselves to these great intentions. I think Rick said it earlier, you know, of being a seeker and being open and being vulnerable. The false self gets ruined in that kind of enterprise. And I wrote this poem after Jim and I had so many conversations, and it actually wrote itself one morning. Brian knows about this. I woke up, and so this is what came. It's on waking, and the subtitle is Wide Awake. I woke up this morning in pure delight. I woke up this morning in pure delight. Your breath, intimate and warm, quietly, in perfect rhythm, drifting in and out with no effort whatsoever, locating me completely in your presence. Much love to you, dear brothers.
Beautiful. Peace.